quickly on because we've got this fantastic array of different topics around people and working together before lunch. We're now going to talk about food, which is a bit teasing and tempting because we're some way from lunch. But I'd like to welcome in a presentation entitled "Food as Glue: Ingredients to Collaborate." And you saw with Primo locating food facilities very close to the town hall. So please welcome Philip Ross, CEO of Unwork, and Barry Varcoe, the global head of CRE and FM at Zurich Financial Services. And I think Philip is going to interview Barry, and they're not going to chew while they speak.
Try not to fall off the front as well.
Absolutely.
That too.
Jeremy, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and I think it follows Primo's comments very well that we want to begin a year-long study into the future of food at work, which Barry has kindly offered to chair and will help direct. So I'm going to actually interview Barry on stage, but I invite you to also ask questions and to stimulate some debate with Barry. And I want to kick off with a contrast to Primo's presentation of these fantastic environments from the West Coast, because I walk around many corporate offices in the UK which don't look like that. And typically you have a construct which I still see on floor plans called the tea point in British offices, which is really a vending machine in a dark cupboard off a corridor. And then you have a staff restaurant somewhere, this big vacuous space. What's the current status quo, Barry? What do we have today and what's wrong with it?
Well, I think that is unfortunately the status quo. I mean, when you come to conferences like this, you always see the sort of the leading and the bleeding edge. And even in those organisations, quite often, that's what they've got in the sort of the headquarters or in one or two locations. And when you start getting deeper into the organisation, it very quickly gets back to the sort of the bland vending machine on the floor, and then a big sort of food factory somewhere, sort of central or somewhere that people can get to fairly conveniently, but it's really a process shop. It's about getting everyone through the system in an hour and a half flat. I mean, we've got this funny notion of the lunch hour still in many countries. It's sort of as far away from food in the rest of our lives as you could imagine. I often think when I visit both in the organisation I work for and other organisations, when I have food at that organisation through one of their outlets or our own, I think, well, how would this outlet fare on the high street? If this was genuinely a competitive business proposition, how many people would walk through the door? And it's pretty quick to decide what the answer would be, which is that you would probably find that big hall with identikit desks everywhere laid out for eating would be pretty empty, unfortunately. So I think it's an area that has got huge potential. So there's a very positive reason for dealing with it. But I think at the moment, for by and large, it's pretty negative as an experience.
And why do we still have these tea points, these cupboards of vending machines? What is that about? Is that the only solution? Is there an alternative approach?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a lack of imagination, and it's a lack of attention to detail. I think the starting point as well is in terms of food is to as it is with sort of new ways of working. I mean, we're very much quite good at looking at how we provide a variety of propositions for people, but we're still assuming that everyone's identical. And that sort of does extend into new ways of working as well. We all assume that if you want to be, to write a report, that you're going to want to be quiet and reflective and go off into one of these sort of soundproof booths or shut the door or whatever. You only have to look at a Myers-Briggs profile to see that they've sort of aggregated it down to 16 types of generic people. And of course, we're all individuals, and people will respond to different environments in different ways. So I think we've just got to let go our imagination a bit and sort of understand how important food is to us as human beings. I mean, it's a basic fundamental requirement, but then once you've got over that sort of level of basic need, then I think society for thousands of years has evolved and shown that food becomes a rallying point. It's part of community. It's how people sort of socially interact. Yet at work we don't seem to see it as that, by and large. Some have, but most haven't. And I don't think really we've scratched the surface in terms of what we can do.
And we've also explored new ways of working, you know, for many years. Have we had an alignment of food and drink to that? Have we had new ways of eating yet?
No, we certainly haven't had new ways of food. Again, when you look at all the different types of variety of ways in which you can buy and consume food outside of work, we certainly haven't successfully, in my view, sort of brought that to within the new types of workspace that we're now providing. It still tends to be, for most people, a more sort of the efficiency that takes over. We look at the sort of the central area and the bulk mass processing of food and getting people through that. I think where we've got to get to is to have a much more of a range and a choice of settings. We've got to take the food to where people want to consume it. Again, if you're on a sort of it gets to 12 o'clock, 12:30, you're in a really engaged setting with people, and you're really being creative. You don't want to have to stop and go off and eat because by 1 or 1:30 the restaurant's shut and you're hungry. We should be able to take food to where the work needs to get done, or not force people to walk halfway across a campus to get to where they want to get something if it's something quick. Similarly, obviously, if you do want to have something more substantial, then provide for that as well. So I really do think it is a case of getting much more choice and looking and understanding at how we can integrate it much more appropriately into how work gets done and how people want to live.
Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, we're just reflecting on Google, who's been an early participant in the research. You know, they have an unwritten rule that you can't be more than 300 feet from food in their workplaces. So they have micro kitchens. They have 120 food offers now around the world. Within Mountain View alone, 700 people just delivering food. And the figures are staggering. I mean, they bake on site 15,000 fresh pastries a day on the Mountain View site for Googlers, and serve over 2 million free meals a year. How does that compare to what you see elsewhere in the world? Are they unique? And I don't know if Primo wants to comment about other food offers that you've been involved in the Valley, but you know, is that just Valley culture? How does that compare? What's the trend?
The lesson I take from Google and others that you see around the world who've really sort of pushed the envelope is not to seek to sort of copy what they do or necessarily take ideas from there. But the powerful thing they do for me is that they have aligned whatever it is they're doing in terms of new ways of working or food, as we're talking about here, to the corporate culture. It makes sense for them. If you take that and put it, I've worked for Zurich Insurance, which is a fairly straightforward insurance company with a very sort of conservative with a small c culture on the outside, because that supports the brand. If we were to suddenly create something wild and wacky with slides everywhere and get your free milkshakes and everything, all the rest of it, it would be such a culture shock. It just wouldn't fit the organisation at all, nor the sorts of profile of people that naturally gravitate to such an organisation to work for it, etc., etc. So what we've got to do, and I think all organisations have to do, is take inspiration from others, but don't sort of seek to ape it all the time. Think through where is the organisation going? What's the cultural fit? What are the senior leaders talking about in terms of the organisation going forward? If you take my organisation, the chief executive and the leadership team are very much emphasising the notion of caring at the moment. Caring for our customers, caring for our staff, caring for the community that we're in, so on and so forth. So a natural extension of that for us through food and caring for our staff is to think in terms of health and wellness, and to understand what food can do in terms of that context. And you can sort of go through many levels of this, and you can start drifting into some exciting areas. So, you know, we're starting to think in terms of all the sort of the overlay there is now between nutrition and the pharmaceutical industry, I mean, a very, very sort of well-known example to a degree is sort of Red Bull. Gives you wings, gives you energy. But there's much more scientific approach to it now in terms of food. I think they call them nutraceuticals. But how it can actually, in effect, it's getting close to food being a drug in a positive way in terms of how it can help you. Similarly, if you start looking at the prevalence of disease, the negative is that food can contribute to disease or the likelihood of it. But similarly, if you have problems, which many do, take diabetes, it's pretty endemic. And I suspect it would be quite disturbing to know if you're in a large organisation how many of your people and employees are struggling with it. Yet what do we do to help them with their food choices in the restaurant or through the food services that we're providing? And you could then go to the next step and saying, well, just as if you were in the corporate gym or whatever it was, or health club, you would have a fitness plan. Why can't we help people with a nutrition plan for whatever helps them with their daily lives and circumstances? So there's all sorts of ways we can do that. It would make sense for us because it would fit directly with Zurich Cares, which is a key cultural shift that we're trying to imbue throughout the organisation. So that shows how we in corporate real estate can very much align with the leadership of the business and help them sort of further the objectives of the organisation and connect with our people.
Okay. I mean, also Google were fascinating. They've just launched the ability to get people to vote on the food they're eating live. So they're using all their mobile phones, 22,000 of them, using NFC in their mobiles, which they now carry, touching feedback in their restaurants and cafes, which then give a social network both to their colleagues about what's good to eat that day and to the chefs who can then load balance what they're cooking. How do you see technology? We have cashless vending as the ultimate technology today with a cashier. Where's it heading next? What might that do?
I think the key for me here, and something I'm keen to explore in the future, is this whole notion of push technology as well, in terms of and helping. We're getting more and more as well as self-service society. So looking at online shopping and all that kind of thing. So I think anything that makes it easier to get what it is you need and what you want. So, for example, disconnecting presence with ordering. So you can, if for example, you're visiting a facility, it's not your base facility, or indeed if it is your base facility, have the menu pushed to you as soon as you walk in through the door on your device, because the facility, if you like, knows you're there. Similarly, if you want to book a room for something, or you've got people coming in, just make it easy to book as well the sort of the nutrition, the drinks, the food, whatever it is that you need. You can then obviously make sure that people are aware of the choices that are available. One of the problems that I find in very large facilities, and I was visiting one about a month ago, they had a fantastic array of choice, but it took 10 minutes to walk all the way around it, literally, I'm not exaggerating, to see what your choice was. And then, of course, you found that what you wanted was way back at the beginning, and it was another 5 minutes to get back there to get what you wanted. So, again, it just makes it convenient. And for most of us, we're time poor, and you don't want to be, it's very frustrating to have a wide range of choice and sort of feel that you haven't got the time to devote to get the most out of it that you want. So I think that's one way around technology helping us. You've then got the whole advance of nanotechnology and how that's going to change the nature of sort of foods anyway. I guess where they'll be much more fit for purpose, or you'll know much more about what it is you're eating. I think that's another key way as well. And then you've got, on a broader level, just making sure that the whole of the area that you're consuming your food, which of course, why is it just, as I said before, 2 hours at lunch, it should be allowing support for it the whole day, is enabled for technology, so it becomes productive space. That's one of the big problems I find with current food provision areas, is that they're there just fit for purpose for that one thing, and they're not attractive for using as a work setting during the normal working day. They're just not designed for that.
And how do you react to Primo's case studies of the kind of the town hall, the all hands space right by the lobby, right as a focal point, compared to our classic canteen that's, as you said, hidden away and used for...
I think that's crucial. I don't necessarily think it needs to be right by the lobby. That's one place you can put it. It's where is the natural nexus point or the flow. I think one of the key things for organisations going forward and for our role in them is to understand flow through facilities and flow through buildings. Where are people moving and how are the communities and the teams aligning themselves, and where they sort of, what are their migratory paths? And then you really want to look at a logical in the logical setting for food is where you're going to get most interflow and intermingling. And sometimes that'll be the entrance, and other times it won't be. We're just thinking through the sort of long-term redevelopment of our corporate headquarters in Zurich. And in fact, right in the middle of the campus is an old building that is heavily protected in terms of the urban authorities, and we can't do much with it. But actually, when we look at how the site could be reconfigured, that becomes the natural hub and the heart. So we flipped our thinking from something that, well, actually, what are we going to do with this, to, and it's a bit of a problem, to actually this could be the nucleus of the whole campus. And that then is where you're going to put the food and the drink and turn it almost into the club. Where people want to come to, and it's part of the natural flow and thoroughfare of the community as well. So it will just be self-reinforcing.
Well, we're launching some research. We kind of feel there's not much out there, don't we? Having looked around the world, and Barry is chairing it. But we're open to people to be involved. We're looking for some corporates and others who would like to participate in a study globally on food at work. Google's already, of course, participating. Cisco and others are involved. If anybody here would like to get involved, let myself or Barry know, and we're kicking this off. I mean, my last question, Barry, is that, you know, when you were at Royal Bank of Scotland, you did some wonderful work on branding, and I remember you telling me both about the brand, but also that no queuing is bad. Can you kind of finally just comment about that, how you actually maximise both the branded proposition, but also optimise people's chances to meet?
Yeah, what we did was we looked at food, and I'll be sort of replicating this to a degree in principle at Zurich. We looked at food as a way in which we could help tie the organisation together. I mean, any organisation that's in multiple regions, multiple countries, food differs. It's part of the diversity, and if you look at that as a way of sort of inclusiveness and starting to take from the menu of different countries. You can start educating and helping the awareness of an organisation around using the food to explain the scope, the spread and the diversity of the organisation for whom they're working. But you do want to get something that's consistent and to tie it together, and brand does that. And again, if you can, align to something that's important within the organisation. So at RBS, 1727 was a significant year because it was the year that it got its sort of royal stamp of approval, and allowed it to call it Royal Bank of Scotland. So we took a sort of an image of the sort of the seal with the 1727, and rather than having, you know, Sodexo, Compass, Restaurant Associates, Aramark, whatever it was, and apologise to anyone I've forgotten, and having, you know, on all the napkins and all the bags that people use that brand, we had 1727 everywhere in the world. It was quite amusing actually in India because it was a bit of a one-upmanship, but there was a sort of a shared food court where we were able to put in our 1727 brand, an outlet for our staff, and other subtenants in this complex had their outlets, and one of them had since 1971 as the strapline, i.e. they'd been around a long time. The next one down the line had since 1954, but when we came in with since 1727, they couldn't compete with that, but it was quite amusing from that point of view. But yeah, so brand, I think, it helps bring an organisation together and creates familiarity, and comes back to this idea of being the glue.
Fantastic.
On that note,
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Philip. Very much, Barry. Thank you.